Welcome to OLC 4.0. This is term 2B. We are looking at class 8, and today we're going to be talking about assignment 10, assignment 11, and get started on assignment 12, just a little bit. We won't get finished. And we're also going to look at prepositions today. This is Jillian Percy, and welcome to class. Student work at nnec.on.ca is how you would hand in assignments. You can also fax them 1-800-463-7852. You can also bring them by the office if you happen to live in town. The nice red office building, WASA, right next to the post office. If you want to ask me a question, you're welcome to call during studio time if we're talking about that assignment right now, 1-800-465-7144. If you want to talk to me about a different assignment, 1-800-667-3703. I am generally here from 12 to 7. I have lunch from 3 to 4. Facebook and YouTube, capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. All right, today's work, we are going to understand prepositions and be able to recognize the jobs they do in a sentence, understand the format of a news article, answer questions about a news article, use the news article format. Oh, and Google, my favorite Google, has decided to sign me out again. All of those in Radioland. I feel so sorry. I keep having to say this. Sorry, I sometimes try to switch over to PowerPoint, but PowerPoint doesn't link up as well to some things. So that has its own problems as well. No technology is perfect, is it? Oh, and apparently my brain is not perfect as well because I'm not remembering my password. Oh, really? No. Okay. Well, this will be a problem. Okay. Must have just been typing too fast. My apologies, guys. As always, I feel like I should have some little music here. Do 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 do. My apologies. All right, prepositions. You can just not get enough of them, but we will today. Don't worry. Oh, something went wrong. No, tell me it's not so, Google. All right, let's try this again. Okay. Oh my goodness, I was literally spent all day in it. I don't know why it's suddenly deciding now to kick me out. And magically there I am. Okay. All right. We were looking at this. Use the news article format to demonstrate your understanding of chapter 1 and how to write a news article. Identify the most important elements of a news article and include them in your writing. Okay. So we're going to start with a little bit of grammar. We always do because just kind of get that grammar down makes writing so much easier. A preposition is a word or several words that connect a noun or a pronoun to the rest of the sentence. The preposition will show what type of relationship that word has to the rest of the sentence. It may show direction, time, place, location, spatial relationships, agency, measurement, or other types of relationships. Prepositions will come at the beginning of what is sometimes called a prepositional phrase. Occasionally, prepositional phrases will also be adverb phrases that describe or modify the verb in some way. Basically, the same phrase is kind of doing two jobs at once, like when you're the secretary, but you also are running the office kind of thing. All right, prepositions have several different categories of types of relationships. They can show time, they can show the place and location, they could show direction, they can show agency, in other words, who did it, what agent did it, instrument, what kind of tool is being used, manner, how something's being done, purpose, possession, and the source or the origin of something. We're going to start with possessive prepositions. These are the ones that show that ownership or belonging. Like the car was given to her. This gift is for Dad. The house was built by my grandfather. The textbooks belong to the school. I'm a leader in the group. I have a membership with the club, and she made it on the cheerleading team. Prepositions of time. There are a lot of prepositions of time. I do not know why we have so many, but we do. During shows that we use that when something's happening at the same time as something else is happening. Like During dinner, the TV was on. Okay. 4, used with a certain period of time. Like I'm just going to go to bed for 2 hours or so. Until or till, up until a certain time. Like we'll wait till 6:30 for you. Since, that's referring backwards to a point in time when something began. 40 years have passed away since they met. From and to are a pair. They show when something begins and ends. Her visit will extend from a Monday to Thursday. Ago is also referring backwards in time to something that happened. He left the house over an hour ago. Before is referring to any time before the specific point in time mentioned, like she's always up before dawn, or she's always up before her husband goes to work, or something like that, right? By is not later than. So he had promised to be back by 5 o'clock. That was kind of his end time. After is when we want to say later in time. I felt fairly relaxed after taking the medicine. I made supper after I got home. It's telling you a sequence of time. 2 is telling you the time when it's referring to the number of minutes before an hour. It's a quarter to 2. So it's not quite 2 o'clock. It's a quarter of the clock to 2. Past is referring to after the hour. It's 10:05. Between and are another pair. They talk about a time that separates 2 points. Like they lived in New York between 1998 and 2004. Not before and not after. Within refers to a span of time during which something might occur. You should receive a reply within 7 days. Okay. Prepositions of time. Oh, and unfortunately, these are ones, they're supposed to be ones that we do together, and yet I have already finished them. In winter, the snow will be deep. I always go camping during the summer. He likes to work out before he goes to work. It is 10 minutes to 3. School starts at 9 o'clock. You will get your check in the mail within 10 business days. It's only been 3 weeks since I started chemo. I am going to grab a nap for half an hour. One of the things that make prepositions tricky is they're a little bit what they call idiomatic. In other words, they aren't necessarily literal. We've just kind of developed a habit of using certain types of prepositions to indicate certain types of relationships. So you have to kind of just sort of begin to become familiar with them. Like, so the example since, I could have said it's only been 3 weeks ago I started chemo, but ago sort of implies that it happened once and it hasn't happened again. Since implies it's still going on. So it's kind of a really tiny little difference, and yet that difference is important when you're talking. Prepositions of location. These ones are usually followed by the article the and the noun you're trying to locate. There's an assumption that both the speaker and the listener understand what object is getting referred to. For example, the keys are on the table, and both people know what table we're talking about. The bread is behind the milk. The rake is against the shed. The garden hose is around back of the house. The ketchup should be between the mustard and the mayo. Other prepositions would be things like in, on, at, by, near, nearby, above, below, over, under, up, down, around, through, inside, outside, between, beside, beyond, in front of, in back of, behind, next to, on top of, within, beneath, underneath, among, along, against. There are definitely more than just that. But those are some examples. Prepositions of measurement. The most common ones are at, by, for, to, and of. I want a pound of butter. So pound is the measurement, and I'm measuring the butter. You were the winner by a few seconds. Get 2 burgers for $10. Remember that money is a type of measurement. Newborns often weigh between 6 to 10 pounds. I want to buy a meter of green cotton. Remember, measurement's not just how long something is. We can measure time, money, weight, mass, temperatures. We can be super exact, like run to the 1 mile mark, or you can be estimating or talking about something approximate. We need about 5 pounds of potatoes. Prepositions of agency, there's only two, by and with. They're often used when you're writing the passive voice, like the house was built by a famous architect. He dug the hole with a backhoe. Prepositions of origin tell you what something was built from, like the pot is made of copper, the fence is made of wood, or the country that you were born in or that an item was coming from. He is from Norway. This China is from Taiwan. Instrument prepositions indicate what tool or what instrument did the job. He hit the nail with the hammer. He wrote his novel on the computer. The car runs on electricity. She traveled via the subway. The wood is held together by screws. The sound waves are carried through the wires. He finished the painting with a palette knife. Okay, and oh, you know what? I'm going to really quickly undo those. The book was written for, by, or because of Nora Roberts. We would use by because that's describing the agency who wrote it. He fixed the door with, by, or for duct tape. Well, we're talking about an instrument. We're going to use the instrument, the indication of with, not by the duct tape or for the duct tape, but with the duct tape. He is originally blank the Ukraine, to Ukraine, from Ukraine, or like Ukraine. Definitely from, because we're talking about his point of origin. All the animation was completed to, by, or as. You would say by, or you could also say on the computer. The solo in the song was done blank flute, from flute, to flute, with flute. I would say with flute. The cars were shipped by Germany, from Germany, or for Germany. From is the point of origin. The temperature dipped blank 0 degrees, from 0 degrees or to 0 degrees. I would generally say to. They're showing you what it's gone down to. Please get 2 pounds blank steak, with steak, of steak, or for steak. Of steak is showing the measurement. My doctor's appointment was blank 2:30. Not from, but at. At is a really common time one, especially if you're mentioning a specific time. Okay, moving on to lesson 10. Lesson 10 has two parts. They're both pretty easy. It is about what do people read. There are a variety of forms of reading and writing that we come across each and every day in our lives, from text messages to directions to essays and novels. Take the time to brainstorm at least 12 things you are required to read during your time in high school and other things that you and other people read. You can include the types of reading that are mentioned in this question, but do not limit yourself. If there are written words involved, it is reading, and that is worth 5 points. That's the first part. 12 things. In our last class, we brainstormed a huge list of things you could use for your reading log. So if you're stuck for ideas, go back and check that. Part 2 is asking you to write 5 sentences and comment on the type of reading that you do away from school. Not anybody else, just you at this point. Do you like reading? And if so, explain why and what you like about it. Now, if you don't like reading, that's fine. Just explain why and what you don't like about it. Remember that part 2 must be at least 5 sentences long and in paragraph format. Remember that in a paragraph, the sentences follow one after another, and they're not separated by a space or a line. I want to say one word about opinions because opinions come up a few times in our assignments. I want to reassure you there is no right or wrong opinion on a topic in this course. I am only looking at how you explain your reasons for the opinion. And I look at whether you stay on topic. I check to make sure that the reasons you give actually relate to the topic. I look to see if your reasons are vague or give a lot of details. I look to see that you followed paragraph structure, but it does not matter to me which opinion you have or whether we have the same opinion. There's not a wrong opinion for these types of questions, okay? I simply am looking at how you communicate your ideas, not whether I think they're correct. I will happily give someone a excellent mark, even if I do not agree with them. That does not matter. I'm only looking at your writing skill. Okay. So here is a different topic, and I'm giving you one version with what I love and a different version saying, no, I don't like that, just to kind of give you an idea of how these kind of opinion paragraphs might sound. Do you or do you not like riding a bike, and explain why? Yes, I do love riding a bike. I love using it as an alternative to walking. I can go pretty fast, and I love feeling the wind in my hair. It's fun to take the bikes out with my husband or my kids and take a ride together. I also enjoy being able to go farther than I can walk. I don't have to start up the car and use all that gas or hurt the environment. Riding a bike is both fun and useful to me. Or I could say, no, I don't like riding a bike. It really hurts my knees, and I find I can't go very fast. I get tired out biking so much quicker than walking. Plus, I have a terrible time getting up the hills. I always end up getting off the bike and walking it up the hill. Why not just ditch the bike in that case and simply walk? I just find biking a lot of hard work for not a lot of reward. It is just an activity that I don't enjoy much at all. Either of these would get the same mark. They're both following paragraph structure. They're telling me their opinion. They're giving me reasons for their opinion. They're writing a closing sentence. They're equal as far as I am concerned for marks. I'm not worried about which one they chose. So don't worry about whether you say if you hate reading, does not matter to me, that's fine. Okay, so moving on to assignment number 11. News articles. News articles have their own format, and sometimes people don't realize that different types of writing have their own formats with their own set of rules or customary ways of presenting their information. For example, personal narratives are often presented in a chronological format, and that means the events are told about in the same order as they occurred. Informational articles are often presented in chunks of information with a main idea that is explained through the use of additional supporting details or examples. News articles are written in order of importance. That means that events may be written about out of sequence that they actually happened in order to make sure that the events that are most important are discussed first. We're so used to this when we read news articles, we often don't realize that's what's happening. So assignment number 11, it's going to be worth 15 marks. Regardless of what you decide to use for your portfolio in lesson 20, one of the items you will be asked to produce is a news story or a news report. Most news stories or reports follow the same basic structure, the inverted pyramid. You already use this structure all the time, but you probably didn't know it had a name. For example, when you call or text a friend to tell him or her that something important is going on, you begin by giving the most interesting and important details first. The least important details and information usually come at the end of the conversation, and sometimes you don't even get them until after a follow-up conversation. That is the inverted paragraph. In pyramid, important details first. So up top of the pyramid or in your news article is the most important information. The middle of the pyramid is additional important details. And then the bottom part is like, it would be nice if they had it, but it's not the end of the universe if they don't get it. This part up top is usually called the lead paragraph. And it's often 2 or 3 lines, maybe 2 or 3 sentences, depending. It usually summarizes the facts of the news report from most newsworthy to least newsworthy. And the reader should know just by glancing at those top few sentences what the news report is about and what the emphasis is. The lead usually contains answers to the 5 W's and H. I'm going to come back to this in a second. The news article, this article and this report, this format is a major format that we come back to over and over again in this course. So I do want you to really get the hang of this, okay? Understanding the news you read is a pretty major element of being a responsible citizen and an important element of mastering literacy skills. Okay. We will not only read about news articles, but we are going to be writing news articles ourselves very shortly. So, understanding the format is pretty crucial for the next few assignments in this course. Okay. So, who, they always name the subject of the story. The who could be a person, a group, a building, an institution, could be a concept, a contest, anything about the story that is going to be written. What? What is the action taking place? Like, what is happening? When tells the time the action is happening. It's often an adverb or an adverb phrase. Where is the place the action is going to be happening? In this case, it's telling you where the spin is taking place. Why? It's the explanation. Why is something happening? How and how usually describes the manner in which something occurs. The first four are fairly straightforward normally. The why and the how might get described more in detail in the middle of this story. So the following is an example of a news report that will give you an idea of how you should write your own. And we're going to read it, and then you guys are going to answer some questions about it. Before I go any further, okay, understanding vocabulary can be a really important part of understanding a news article. And this news article right away uses a phrase called a contender. It's a bit of an unusual phrase. If you're not familiar with a word and it seems like an important word, always, always, always look it up, okay, guys? Here, Webster's defines a contender as somebody who competes for a championship. It is not the name of a person. When we're talking about who is in the article, you can't say contender is in the article because contender doesn't mean anything specific in that way. Okay. Also, think about when they say an unsigned First Nations drum group, what are they talking about? What do they mean unsigned? Well, basically, when people get a record contract, I don't know if it's still called that these days, but anyways, they sign the contract with the record label, the people that produce and distribute the album. Okay. And once you're signed, you're usually locked into that contract and you can't use somebody else. But if you're unsigned, you are still available, and new producers or new record companies might be looking for you. So in this particular contest, it is specifically only for unsigned First Nations groups, which generally means new groups, groups that are just starting out. Because once you've developed some success, usually you are going to get signed on to somebody. Okay. So the title of this article is Powwow Idol Includes Nova Scotia and Ontario Finalists. August 4th, 2019. Two Canadian contenders are among the finalists in Powwow Idol, an online competition to find the best unsigned First Nations drum group in North America. The competition is in its 9th round, and a tribe called Micmac of Melbrook, Nova Scotia, and the Chippewa Travelers of South Central Ontario are still in the running. They are competing against a group from Maine, the sole American-based survivor of 12 drum groups that entered the competition in January. Okay. The competition combines the digital with the traditional. All the groups have competed with victory or veteran songs, fancy shawl or fancy feature songs, two-step songs, and a round dance. All the performances are online as audio files, and judging is also over the internet. A tribe called Micmac has been playing together for just over a year and decided to take a chance when it entered Powwow Idol. Michael Stevens, 27, the group's drumkeeper, said he doesn't know why they have done so well in the competition. Everybody has their own unique sound and their own unique way of singing, Stevens told CBC News. Each drum is special in its own way, I guess. So we are very fortunate and blessed we have made it this far. Their Facebook page is flooded with good wishes from supporters in their Nova Scotia community. They are passing on their experience to even younger musicians on the Millbrook First Nation, among them Justin Stewart Muse, 10, who was at a recent practice section. It's awesome. It's smart. It inspires me to think good thoughts, he said, as the group pounded a traditional drum with one hand and squeezed their throats with the other to help them hit the high notes. Chippewa Travelers are a northern style drum group who started singing together in 1998. The more than 15 members come from Rama, Sarnia, Alderville, and other southern Ontario communities. They'll find out late Sunday or early Monday if they move on to the final round of the competition. A winner will be announced in early June. Now, I wanted to address one issue. Why does Google keep underlining all these words in red? Are they actually spelled wrong? No. It's just that Google will often not recognize unusual names of people or places, so it thinks it must be a spelling mistake. Remember, it's a machine. It's not smart. It just has a dictionary. And whenever you're spelling things, it checks your dictionary. If those words aren't in its dictionary, then it must be wrong as far as it's concerned. Now, usually there's an option to add things to the dictionary, okay? So powwow traditionally has a space between the two words, so it thinks it's wrong. I'm not sure why Alderville would be wrong or travelers. Those are both fine, but it just does. Don't feel like you have to change it just because Google says so. I guarantee you these ones are fine. So the hard part about this particular assignment is the questions start at the bottom of the one page, but then they continue on the next page. And a lot of people don't notice the questions on the next page. And yet that is where most of the marks are. So it's really important that you don't just answer these two little questions, but you also answer the next question, okay? Also, sometimes people try and squeeze the answer really tiny onto this page, but they honestly did not leave enough room. Even if you could write small enough to fit it in there, it would probably be too small for me to read, okay? I've got old eyes. I need it to be nice and big, okay, people? Um, you also have to be able to respond in complete sentences. They've left you so little room that would be hard. On the next page is question number 3, which is worth 12 marks. And it's going to need lined paper to answer anyways, or the computer if you're handing it on the computer. So you might as well just do it all together there. So it's all in one spot and easy for me to mark. Number 1, the purpose of this news report is blank because blank. Remember, there's only 3 purposes for writing. Big purposes: persuade, inform, or entertain. Pick one of those and explain why you think you've chosen the correct answer. Number 2, who do you think is the intended audience for this news report? I often get an answer for everyone, but the truth is not everybody likes the same type of music. My mom doesn't listen to the same kinds of things I do. My brothers don't listen to the same kind of thing I do. Who do you think would be interested in this particular type of music? Okay. I will take any reasonable answer. I just ask you not to write the word everyone because that's very rarely true when it comes to music. Music is so individual. So it often will connect to somebody specific. Okay. So here, this part comes at the top of page 41. Okay. It's worth the most marks though. So if you miss this part, you won't get all the marks that you're entitled to. Okay. It says the most important questions a good news report answers for the reader are the 5 W's and H. H stands for how, by the way. Using the report, complete the following, and 12 means 12 marks. Who, what, when, where, why, or how. So it's important to answer these questions in a complete sentence rather than just one word. For example, if somebody asked, who is your teacher? You wouldn't just write Jillian. You would write Jillian is my teacher. I know in conversation, one word is fine, but in writing, we try to always answer in complete sentences, okay? I'm going to expand these questions because I don't like how they phrased it. If I'm asking you to write complete sentences, I feel like the questions should be complete sentences as well. So, who is this story about? What is or what has happened? When is it happening, or did it already happen in the past? Where is it happening? Why is it happening? And how is it happening? So you should be able to answer all of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. 2 marks for each one of those if you answer correctly and in a sentence. Okay, so we are going to look at the writing process. This is us getting ready to do the next assignment. I will not get through all the details of this. We are going to start it though, okay? So the writing process has 5 stages. This is kind of our first official introduction to the writing process stages. We're going to really focus on learning how to do stage 1 and stage 2 today, but we will discuss all of them. So the first stage is pre-writing. Sometimes it's called planning. In this stage, you will gather and generate ideas or on a subject, and the main goal in this stage is to get the ideas flowing and then put them down on paper. Mapping and brainstorming are 2 types of pre-writing activities. The second stage is drafting. In this stage, you're going to begin the actual process of giving shape to your ideas by designing a rough outline and writing a first draft or rough copy. The words and phrases from stage 1 are put into sentences in this stage, but usually sentences that are going to need some work to make them sound as good as they possibly can. Stage 3 is revising. In this stage, you will look over your piece of writing to make sure that the ideas flow smoothly, that the entire piece makes sense. Changes are then made to improve the piece of writing by adding, cutting, replacing, and reordering. If a computer is used, text can easily be changed using the many features of WordPerfect or Microsoft Word. Stage 4. In this stage, you will correct your spelling, grammar, and punctuation. This is the first time in the writing process that you will need to concern yourself with these finer details. Doing it before now is usually unnecessary because the text or the piece of writing may change a lot. And sometimes for some people, it really gets in the way of the creative process because they get very focused on trying to make sure all the spelling is correct and that kind of thing. It should be noticed here that proofreading with editing is checking for any typing errors in the final copy. The last stage is publishing, which for us is usually just handing it in. It can be as simple as writing the final copy, or it can be as complex as submitting it to a magazine for formal publication. Either way, the main issue is that you would be creating a final copy for a potential reader or a wider audience. It's really important to note this writing is not a 1 to 5 stage process. They don't go in order like you're walking to a store. It circles around. You might have many drafts and many revisions before you're finally ready for the editing stage. And the number of drafts and revisions is no reflection of your writing ability, and neither will it be for you. For example, I have done this course, it's my 4th time through. Every single time I've done it, I have made revisions. Every single time. Okay. So don't worry about that. Don't feel like it shows or implies that you're not a good writer. The biggest stage I find people have a problem with is the revision stage. Let me just kind of grab it here. I think people aren't sure what to do here. So 9 times out of 10, I find people try to skip it and just go right over to giving me a good draft. They often skip editing too, but they really skip revising. So we're going to focus on revising a lot in assignment 13. Okay, that is the key part of assignment 13. So today we're going to focus on pre-writing, our planning, and our drafting. Here is the actual assignment. Assignment 12, writing a rough draft. It is worth 27 marks. Okay, so the following is another example of a news report. This one has been highlighted to show the different parts of the news report that you will need to include in your own. I want to point out, sometimes people ask me, oh, do I need to do that highlighting or that kind of bold typography or something? No, absolutely not. No, they're just doing it to show you that it's there. Okay. So here's an example of a news story about a bus accident. The title or headline is City's Third Bus Fatality. And then they have the date. There's always a date at the beginning of a news article. Ottawa, July 27th. Yesterday afternoon, a pedestrian identified today as Joe Johns was fatally struck by a bus while crossing Bank Street near Walkley Road. He was running with an iPod when the accident happened. So that whole little section there is the lead paragraph, and you can see they covered a lot of things. When did it happen? July 27th, which was yesterday afternoon. Who was it about? Joe Johns. What happened? He was fatally struck by a bus while he was crossing the road. Where did it happen? Bank Street near Walkley Road. How did it happen? Well, he had an iPod on and probably didn't hear things when he was crossing over. And then they go into expanding on the details, right? But if all you read was that first lead, you would still know all the important stuff about that story. Okay. So here's the middle part. Michael Andrews, an off-duty police officer, was first on the scene. Andrew reports, I gave him first aid and emergency teams arrived here quickly. Unfortunately, we were unable to revive Joe Johns. It is believed that he died on impact. Witnesses were left in shock following the accident. Amy Anstey was driving east on Walkley when she witnessed the accident firsthand. I will remember that for the rest of my life, she sobbed. I felt helpless as I watched him run unknowingly into traffic. So, good news articles always include a quote. Johns was a single father of two teenage girls and lived in the Alta Vista area. John's friends came forward on a Facebook memorial site today, leaving messages like, John, you are my friend. May you rest in peace. And many respondents cited John's tremendous compassion. You were there for my family when I was sick, and I will be here for yours. And then we get down to the tail. The tail is the least important part. It's details that if it got cut would not really affect anybody's understanding of the story. Bank Street was closed last night for 2 hours while officers investigated the accident scene. It appears that the bus driver had followed all traffic regulations and that Johns had tragically run into traffic. Okay. So we noticed the headline, which tells you what the story's about. The lead, they wrote it in bold. Remember, it should answer the 5 W's and H. It should generally not be more than 1 or 2 sentences in length, be really brief and clear. Okay. Yep, they followed the inverted pyramid. Okay, we're going to be using the writing process to write your own report. And yeah, then we'll revise it for assignment number 13. So this is the news report checklist. After you finish writing your news report, you're going to want to check this again. Everything should be yes. If you're getting even only somewhat, you need to fix it and go over. Nothing should be in the no category. So first, have you included a headline that is short and catches the reader's attention? Is a date included in the report? Have you named an appropriate who? Have you explained what, when, where, why, and are they correct? Correct would mean, do they match chapter 1? Because this is about chapter 1, right? The how demonstrates your understanding of the event. Your quotes are thoughtful and appropriate to the event. The level of detail demonstrates considerable understanding of the event. In other words, you understood chapter 1 really, really well, okay? So, let's see. Choose a topic for the news report. It has to be from chapter 1, anything that you thought was newsworthy. You might have to make up a few details, but you can't change any details. Sometimes people have gone in and like added new names or given people different ages. You can't do that. It's just like if they haven't included somebody's last name, you can make something up or something. It has to make sense, okay? Try to keep the making up to a small amount. Any information that was provided in the novel should be the first thing you go to for the 5 Ws and the how. Your topic will become your headline. If you want to, you can use juvenile offender back in town if that's what you're writing about. Not everybody chose to write about that. 2 marks for whatever headline you do create. News reports will often have photos to show the event being reported on. Please draw a picture, or you can locate a photo or other graphic from a magazine or the internet that would appear with your news report. That is worth 5 marks. It should obviously be something appropriate that makes sense in the context of that story. Like you wouldn't just show a tree because trees weren't a big part of the chapter 1, right? Question number 3, figure out what details you want to include. This part is just going to sort of break down what you need to do to write it. There's no separate marks for this part, okay? You may have to make up some details. You might have a quotation. You should have a quotation. Think about what your quotations are and who's going to say them. Let me think about. It is okay to make a very reasonable quotation because there isn't a lot of talking in chapter 1, so you probably are going to have to. Remember that it should include something that the public would be interested in hearing about. So the quotation of, say, the cop said, "Hi." No, that isn't really a very interesting quotation. Make it something more interesting, right? Okay, let's look at the next part. Sorry, I'm trying to grab the next slide. Number 4, this is the part where you're actually writing the rough draft of the news story. This part is worth 20 marks. Write a rough draft of your news report. It must be 1 page in length, handwritten, okay? Please don't just hand me in 5 sentences. It should be a full page. Don't worry so much about the fine details like spelling, grammar, and punctuation, but it should make sense and it should have all the sentences that you need to tell the story. Sometimes people hand me in a rough draft and they think it means like just kind of skimp it. And they hand me in like 5 or 6 sentences and they really haven't done the work that you need to do a rough draft, okay? 5 sentences is more of a brainstorming. It's not actually your rough draft. For now, really focus on getting your story down using that inverted pyramid structure and ensure that all the elements in that checklist are present. Remember to think about what is most important. The 5 W's should all get told in the lead, which is the first 1 to 2 sentences, then any really important details, and finally, things that might be interesting, but if they got left off, people would really understand what was happening. 5 W's and also how. I don't know why, but we always have to include our how. There we go. Okay, so this is the rubric for the news report. I've kind of revised the other one that was there. I thought it maybe wasn't as clear as it needed to be, okay? So there's 4 categories. I'm looking at your knowledge and understanding of the event in the chapter. So if you're making up too many things, then you're not showing me that you understand the chapter. You want to put as many details from the chapter into the story as makes sense so that I know you understood it. Then we're looking at your thinking and inquiry skills. How did you select the facts? How did you organize the facts? How did you create or use interesting quotes? Did you locate or create an interesting graphic? Did you create an interesting headline? And then communication, we're looking at, did you write in full sentences? Did you use proper paragraphs? Did you have a good length and grammar? Finally, the last section is application. Did you include the headline, the date, the lead with the 5 W's, objective tone, 3rd person point of view, and did you remember to use a quote? Hang on, I'm sorry, it's kind of moving on me a little bit. There we go. Okay, so for assignment number 12, the news story is out of 20 marks. So each of these categories is worth a maximum of 5 marks each. Level 4 could be 4 to 5 marks. Level 3 could be 3.5 to 3.95 marks. Level 2 could be 3 to 3.45 marks. Level 1 could be 2.5 to 2.95 marks, and below 2.5 is in the R section. I will usually pick a whole number if I can. Now, generally, level 4 means they have a very extremely good knowledge or ability. Level 3, strong knowledge or ability. Level 2 is some knowledge and ability. Level 1 is limited knowledge or ability. And then level R is extremely limited or just not shown at all. Okay. So here I've kind of circled what I think this particular person got on their assignment. This is all imaginary, right? Just kind of show you how I do this so you understand the marking scheme. So for knowledge, I circled level 1 and they would get 2.5 marks. For thinking, I circled level 2 and they got 3 marks. For communication, I circled level 2 and they got 3 marks. And then for application, level R. Oh no, they didn't write their news report very well. So then they got 2. So if I add this all up, they ended up with 10.5 out of 20. So they still passed. They may not have demonstrated a good knowledge of a news report, but they demonstrated a good knowledge of the event and thinking skills. So it is possible to pass, even if your writing isn't as far along as you might be. So sometimes people get really intimidated by this. I try to mark in a reasonable fashion. So this is our rubric. Pay attention to that when you're looking at your own work. So we've only got 4 marks left. I must have talked. I didn't think I talked so slow, but anyways, anything I don't finish, we will talk about some more tomorrow. Okay, guys? Any event in chapter 1 can be the focus of your news article. Some possible events could be Jimmy and Gary being arrested and questioned for the break-ins and the arson, Jimmy's conviction for arson and being sentenced to juvie, Jimmy's return to the community. You can also slant the article or put a little bit of bias on it if you wish. Remember, the reporter can't express an opinion, but the people he quotes can. So the community might be very supportive of Jimmy or Gary. Community might be very unhappy about Jimmy and Gary. Different community members might have different opinions on Jimmy and Gary and their actions. Okay, creating a headline. Your headline should be eye-catching. It should make you want to know more about the story, but it should also be truthful. You don't want it to be fake clickbait type stuff that when you read the story, it doesn't match. Present tense, it's generally written as if it's happening right now. I don't know why, just is. Grammar, just the most important words. It's usually bolded like darker, so it really stands out. It starts with a capital letter. It does not need end punctuation, does not need a period or a question mark or any of that kind of stuff. Occasionally it might have it, but it's not common, okay? So here are some examples. A man saved a dog. No, if I was going to write it in headline format, I might say, man saves dog. A group of thieves robbed a bank. That's more like a sentence. Headline format, I would say, gang of thieves rob CIBC Bank. And see how I changed the kind of bland word group to the more exciting word gang? A woman almost drowned going through the ice. So now I'm going to change it to be a little more exciting. Woman falling through ice barely survives drowning. Ooh, that sounds way more interesting, doesn't it? Okay, where are we? So here is a sample of how your assignment might begin to look. Question number 1, my headline is going to be Youth Given a New Start. Question number 2, here's a copy of the graphic I might include. Because you can't see the youth face and I don't really know what Jimmy looks like. Also, the t-shirt he's wearing seems really appropriate. You can also do a drawing if you don't have access to the internet. You could draw Green Star Lake or the plane or the building on fire, whatever makes sense according to what story you've written. When you begin writing, before you get too far, think about who is your audience. If you were a real reporter, who'd be reading the story? What would be important about this story to them? So picture if someone had gotten in trouble in your community for setting a fire and had gone away for a while and now is returning to your hometown. What would people be thinking about? Would older people maybe have a different viewpoint than the youth? Who would actually be reading the paper? And what might they be wondering about? Would they be feeling happy, sad, angry, worried? So remember that reporters are in the business of writing, but they want those papers to sell, right? Nobody makes any money if the paper doesn't sell. I know that some of the smaller papers around here don't get sold, but most papers people have to buy in order to read them. So they think about, hey, who's going to read this? And they make sure they target the story towards that audience. So you want to be acting just like a real reporter and thinking about that too. Um, the next big thing is, what would a reporter know or ask? A lot of chapter one is written from Jimmy's viewpoint. Okay. The reporter would not necessarily know everything Jimmy is thinking or feeling or that Jimmy is doing unless he's right there or somebody tells it to him. Okay. So, for example, the reporter isn't sitting on the plane. So he's not going to know what Frank, the probation officer, said to Jimmy unless one of them tells the reporter. And generally, reporters will say who gave them the information to kind of be upfront about where their sources came from. Not always, if it would put the person at risk or if it's confidential. So the reporter might have access to their police reports or the original news stories about the fire. He might have interviewed people like the chief, the police, the grandma, and his friends, in which case he would probably quote them, right? He would say, the grandmother said, blah, blah, blah. The chief said, blah, 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 right? Whatever it would be. Remember, you are allowed to make up some quotes. This is the one area where I don't mind you making things up because the people didn't really talk a whole lot in chapter one. You don't need to have too many quotes, but it would be okay to list 2 or 3 quotes of different opinions. Just remember to make them something interesting that makes sense in the context of the story, not just something like hi or hello. That's just not really going to make the story make any sense. Remember, the reporter wants to make it interesting. So if somebody says something like where they sound like, oh my goodness, they can't wait for this kid to get back home, great. Or if somebody said something really controversial about how they don't want Jimmy to come home, that might get quoted as well. Okay, I'm just putting a little heart here to show this is where I'm ending up because my time has run out. I'm sorry. All right, we will tackle this some more tomorrow. My apologies. It's a big assignment. It's kind of our first major one, so I didn't really have time to get through it all today. But this is enough to kind of get you started thinking about how to work on this assignment, okay? Thank you so much for showing up, and we will talk about this some more on, I believe, Monday. All right, thank you and have a good weekend.